They kept her high, not just with pills and parties, with pressure, with silence, with the weight of being looked at. She was the girl in every window, the face behind every whisper, and for a while, it worked, until it didn't.
Playing must be something that appeals to you.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to go from from doing this kind of thing, really play it down and be really kind of no makeup and no hair, and then go completely the opposite and do everything, pile on the makeup and give me the rollers and the big hair and, the dress and the cleavage, if you can. Thank you. I'd just like to thank everyone that I've worked with over all the years, and I really appreciate this award. Thank you.
Everyone knows what she became. Only few remember how she began. She was barely 14 when someone noticed her across a terminal, not for beauty, not for glamour, but for how still she was, how unscripted. The lights at JFK Airport flickered like an old film reel. Summer heat clung to her sleeves. She wasn't waiting for discovery. She was waiting to be left alone.
How did you get discovered? In JFK Airport, when I was 14 by my agent in London. And then that's it, I started doing it then.
So you've been doing it for a while?
Yeah, but I've never done runway before. This is my first season of runway.
What do you think about doing this? They're all taller than you, for one thing.
I get heels. I get heels and they get flats. Thank you.
Sarah Dukas stopped. Something in the quiet of that posture, the closed mouth, the neutral space around her, it shifted the air. She wasn't tall. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to be seen. She was just Kate. London was colder, and Corinne Day didn't warm it up. There were no stylists, no soft lights, just a mattress, a lens, and the kind of silence that creeps into your bones. She lay there like a question, not posed, but exposed. Her eyes drifted past the lens, unfixed and far away, as if something within her refused to be held still. The quiet curve of her ribs spoke louder than any directed posture, suggesting vulnerability without asking for it. Her mouth remained closed, unreadable, not in defiance, but as if language itself had no place there. And yet the photograph struck a nerve. Not because she offered something, but because she withheld everything. She didn't sell beauty. She didn't perform. She simply existed in the frame, and that somehow became dangerous.
Really is. It's like sitting there with all of them today, with Bubbles and Safi and Eddie and Patsy, is weird. It is really weird, because it is am I really here? It's like when Eddie goes into her dream sequences. People in the fashion industry love that. I think it's, it's brutal, but the fashion industry is brutal. It is exactly it's not really, some of it is so spot on. It's kind of ridiculous. Well, I grew up with it. So, when I started modeling, it started, and it was such a amazing take on the fashion business. It kind of made me laugh, which was a good thing, because it's not always funny.
They called it heroin chic. She didn't call it anything at all. She just kept showing up. By the early 1990s, her face was everywhere, on billboards and bus stops, folded into glossy spreads, etched into the surface of a decade that wasn't sure whether it worshipped rebellion or fragility. Kate Moss became the shorthand for something undefined, something people couldn't quite name, but everyone seemed to want. Then came Calvin Klein. Minimalism was the mood, and Kate was chosen to embody it. She stood next to Mark Wahlberg, half-dressed, her posture withdrawn, her gaze distant. The camera didn't catch seduction. It captured discomfort. Years later, she said she cried after that shoot, that the images didn't feel like her, that she felt small, alone, and out of place in her own body.
You hope to do something that stimulates people, that stimulates their imagination, and that gets noticed, which touches a nerve with men especially. That's always on the edge a little bit.
The world didn't hear that part. The campaign exploded. Her image circled the globe. Her silence, her restraint, her hesitance became style codes, a kind of cool you couldn't fake because it wasn't performed. And from that moment on, her body was no longer her own.
The 80s were over, and the 90s, to me, represented something different, something more natural, something less flashy.
For like 2 years I did like go-sees and worked for no money. I was always borrowing money off my mum. She was beginning to get fed up with it and started telling me to get a job, proper job and stuff like that when I started to work, so.
She became a system of symbols, a mood board before the word existed. Designers adored her blankness. Advertisers relied on her stillness. But underneath, things were shifting. The tabloids started watching, not with admiration, but with appetite. They fixated on her weight, on her voice that rarely broke the surface, on the way she seemed too still to be selling anything. They called her too thin, too quiet, or too strange.
She is thin, but she's natural. This is who she is, and yes, she's thin, and models should be thin. Their clothes just look better on people who are thin, and certainly photograph better. But there's nothing artificial about her.
But they kept her on the covers. She was 19, without a PR team nor a caring management, and without any personal shield. Just a girl with one expression and 1,000 projections mapped onto it. Something behind the stillness had started to give way. Behind the stillness, something was cracking. By 2005, the cracks had widened. Kate Moss was no longer just a model. She had become a myth, familiar, iconic, untouchable. But the reality behind the image was less clean, less curated. She was dating a man who seemed made of chaos. Pete Doherty, the frontman of the Libertines and Baby Shambles, poet of self-destruction and the magnet for police reports and overdose headlines. The tabloids called them doomed. He called her his muse. Together they became a spectacle. Photographed in hotel corridors, slouched in the back of cabs, blinking against flashlights they never invited. They looked beautiful, and at the same time broken. Then came the tape. September 15th, 2005. A grainy video leaked from a studio. Kate leaning over a table. White lines, no words. The fallout was immediate. Burberry cut ties, H&M dropped her. Chanel too. One by one, the contracts dissolved, some within hours. She didn't speak. There was no press conference, no emotional apology for the cameras, no curated redemption arc, just a written statement promising to get help. Authorities launched an investigation. While Pete spiraled further into addiction, Kate disappeared. She left the country. She wasn't gone entirely, and it wasn't for good. But for a moment, the headlines moved on. The tabloids followed her to the parking lot. Arizona offered the kind of silence London could not. No flashing bulbs outside a clinic gate, no journalists perched in rented cars. Just the stillness of wide skies and distant roads. In that dry, quiet landscape, she withdrew briefly, carefully from the rhythm of public life and drugs. In rehab, no one knew what was being rebuilt or what was being left behind. It wasn't marked by any gesture, no interviews, no statements, no curated moment of return. Whatever had shifted, it happened quietly, off record, off camera, and without design. After some time, she reappeared without announcement or any explanation. There had been no public sign of a comeback, just a quiet casting, a familiar face in a seasonal lineup, perhaps a single editorial call. The return wasn't framed as a statement. It simply happened, quietly, as part of a life still in motion. Later in Paris, a moment unfolded that would mark her quiet return to power. Alexander McQueen's show. The lights dimmed. A glass box appeared. Inside, smoke, silence. A projected figure suspended in air. It was Kate. She didn't walk. She didn't speak. She turned, slowly, weightlessly. For some, it was fashion's most haunting moment. For others, it was her rebirth. No statement, no PR, just an image reclaimed. The girl who had been hunted by lenses was now untouchable. Transparent, yes, yet never again grasped without permission. She walked again, Appeared in magazines, the same profile, the same careful quiet. She didn't come back with a documentary. She didn't sit down for tell-all interviews. She just kept going. Her daughter, Lila Grace, began modeling. The industry watched carefully, but Kate let her choose her own rhythm. She worked with brands again, long after they'd left her. She posed for covers, but on her own terms. She joked, she reflected. She edited herself mid-sentence. It wasn't transparency, it was maturity. And when Victoria's Secret called, years after her runway days had ended, she walked. Not as a revival, not as a symbol, just as Kate. The lights followed her down the catwalk, not because they made her shine, but because she was already glowing. She moved back into the world carefully and deliberately. In recent years, she smiled more genuinely, but with the same measured restraint that had always marked her presence. Her words, when they came, were clear and considered. She spoke more often now, but never louder, as if raising her voice would hand something back to the world she had fought to reclaim. She became less of a figure and more of a feeling, something between memory and myth, still moving, but harder to hold. And when she returned to the runway in 2024, people didn't cheer for the clothes. They watched her walk, not like a model, but like someone who had survived the lens. She was visible again, not because the world let her, but because she chose to be. She remained silent, not out of caution, but because there was nothing left she needed to explain. And she was here, not in headlines, but in presence. There's no plaque, no quote, no verdict, no single line to sum her up. What remains are fragments, images without captions, moments without explanations, just clips, covers, a walk, a look. People still argue about what she represented, about what the industry did to her, or what she became inside it. But somewhere between the archive and the runway, she kept showing up.